What's going on, Husker fans? Welcome to the Husker Heisman Huddle on the Believe Podcast Network. I am your host, Sam Casaccio, with fellow hosts and Heisman winners, Johnny the Jet Rodgers and Eric Crouch. And today we have a special guest, Adam Carriker, is joining us as well. So we got three former Huskers on.
What's happening, guys? Great to have you on here, Adam.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'll just break it out here and just ask what is Adam Carriker up to these days? Just tell us a little bit about what's going on with you.
Oh man. Okay. All right. So the Carriker Chronicles is going on its own. I think most people know that by now. I'm being kind of particular. I don't want to call it my baby, but it feels like my baby. I've been doing it for so long.
It is your baby.
Yeah. So I'm being particular. So I probably won't start putting them out until August, get everything lined up, hopefully get some pretty good interviews rolling. In the meantime, I'm fortunate enough to have been asked to do what we're calling the Big Ten show. We're trying to figure out the name, and my co-host had all these names. I'm like, no. Ohio State's the Ohio State. This is the Big Ten show. So that's what we're calling it, the Big Ten show. So we'll be talking. It's fun now. I get to talk about 14 to 16 teams and all sorts of sports, and I got to educate myself a whole lot more. Just kind of getting those things rolling, and then I have 5 kids in all sorts of different spring sports.
Yep.
We have 8 competitive sports going on right now. So once 3:30 hits my house, it's insanity.
It's daddy time.
It is. It's Uber driver time. That's what it is.
Yeah.
What ages are they, Adam?
So Jacob's 13, Addie's 11, Trinity's 10, the twins are 7, and Jordan, the only one not doing sports, is 5.
Oh yeah,
somebody's got to play against the rules, right? There'll be always one kid that wants to be different.
Oh yeah, well, don't worry. When a year from now, she'll start doing her own thing as well. But yeah, right now she's everybody's biggest cheerleader. So
yeah, well, starting them early sometimes it can be a bad thing. Can go against you sometimes.
Yeah, it depends. It's kind of that conundrum. Do you start them early so they start getting some of the fundamentals down? They start understanding things, but then. I've known kids once they reach middle school, they're like, I've been playing tackle football for 5 years already, and I'm exhausted. Or I've been doing competitive basketball for 6 years or 7 years if they're 8th graders. And so it's my goal is that all of my kids, and they're going to eliminate things here and there. That's just a natural part of the process. But they still want to do their favorite sports come high school because they aren't burned out like I see so often. So that's my big goal with them.
We love hearing about that and your kids and your family and just getting updated. Talk about, I'm just curious, I've been on the show Carriker Chronicles a few times with you, and just tell people that are listening, like how you got started with that and maybe why.
Oh man, I'll make a longer story short. I had no desire to host a show. I had no desire to speak for a living. There's a lot of good folks in the media, but I'd ran into a few that partially quoted me. So I wasn't uber excited to join that at first. As you get to know more and more folks, you get to know that there's good folks and there's pains in the butt, just like any profession. It's not unique to that. Long story short, years ago, Pelini got fired. There was a lot of former players who voiced an opinion. I had the complete opposite opinion. I put it out on Facebook. People seemed to respond, and then it morphed into, I wrote an article every week during Riley's first couple of years as a coach. Then it morphed into a video that I put on Husker Max. Then I joined the Herald. Then I parted with the Herald, and now the Chronicles is on its own, and it's just kind of taken on a life of its own, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, and you do a great job of breaking down Husker football, and that I've watched it a bunch of times. It's a great show. I've got a little football question for you, Adam.
Okay. We got football questions here.
We got some football questions.
Husker football questions. Yeah.
Having played in a 4-3 and a 3-4 scheme, and at the next level too, how do you think Tony White's 3-3-5 scheme is going to fit in for the Huskers, and also just in the conference that's often run heavy?
All right. So I got to eat my own words a little bit here, because the biggest question I got, 3-4 or 4-3. My response was always the same. I've watched teams win Super Bowls with the 3-4 and the 4-3. I've watched teams win national titles with both. The 4-2-5, depending on what style of offenses you're facing week in and week out, especially if you're in the Big 12, can be a great defense. I said, as long as it's not 3-3-5, I'll be happy. Well, now we're running the 3-3-5. So I had to.
But what was it that you didn't like about it?
Yeah.
To me, I felt like it was too small, easy to get pushed around. I understand the confusion and the blitzing and the angles and trying to mess up the blockers. I'd never played in it. I had played in we like what's familiar to us. Let's be honest. I had played in all those others, even 4-2-5. That's basically what a nickel package is, essentially. And so for me, I was just more familiar. So once they announced 3-3-5, I did a deep dive. I've learned a lot more things, and I was very curious to see how TCU was going to do against Michigan. You're not going to get a more physical run team in this nation than Michigan, and TCU is an undersized 3-3-5 team. Michigan put up some points, but it was not like they were running through them. I thought Michigan's defense against the run game played well. That was not their issue that day. And so for me, I felt like that was, and I know Tony White's defense is going to be a little bit different. He's probably going to have a little bit more 4-man down than what TCU did, but it really opened my eyes like, hey, this could work. And when I interviewed Matt Rhule, he even talked about, I did some of this at Carolina, and he's like, we had success with it in the NFL. So I am much more open-minded than I once was to it. And I'm actually excited to see how it works. And Eric, you'll understand this. Johnny, you'll know this. Back in the day, Nebraska ran such a unique offense. It was a nightmare for teams to get ready for in 1 week. And then you'd never face it again unless you played Nebraska. Well, Matt Rhule has flat out said that's what we can be like on defense now. We will be unique. And there's not, outside of Iowa, most teams are running out of 3 and maybe even 4 wide receiver sets. So it allows you to match up personnel a little bit better. And then it's a unique defense that you're going to have to try to get ready for in 3 to 4 days. And it's a lot harder than when you're facing a 3-4 or 4-3 week after week. So there's pluses and minuses. And I look forward to learning more about it as this process goes along too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's creative, definitely. We talked about that on this show a little bit, that if you want a creative defense, you want something to be different, to give other teams a little bit of a jump. This is a good way to go about it.
What's the type of talent that you need? What do you focus on in a defense like that, Adam?
So you need some bigger backers. You need some bigger D linemen. You need some safeties who are going to come down and be willing to stick their nose in on run plays, who are willing to blitz. You got to be able to, you can't be like, I don't want to say big fat up front. I'm a former D lineman, so I can. You don't want to be big fat and sloppy up front because you got to be able to stunt. You might be in the C gap, you long stick to the A gap. You might be in the B and you penetrate outside, and then you got a backer coming up your rear up the B gap, so to speak. Or if you're long sticking inside, you might have a backer off your rear and a safety off the edge. So you got to be able to move quickly as well. A lot of the 3-4 D linemen, they're just big, massive dudes. They're building a wall up front so the linebackers can run free and make plays. In the 3-3-5, initially everyone's like, they got to be huge. Well, not quite, because you got to be able to move. Because a big thing in the 3-3-5 is to be able to stunt, move, blitz, and confuse them.
So if they don't, how do they fare with running teams that just primarily run the ball? Because they're trying to blow you out.
Yeah, so that's why TCU was interesting to me. And here's the deal. When you get downhill as a backer or a safety against a big lineman, you got to have no fear. I was genuinely impressed with the mentality, the veracity, the aggressiveness that TCU got downhill. There was safeties blitzing, taking on, pulling 330-pound linemen. And I don't want to say knocking them backwards, but they weren't getting moved. And then all of a sudden they were plugging holes, and then the blitzers were coming free. And it's not like they just blew up the Michigan offense, but I didn't see it as a liability in that game at all. Actually, as the game went along, Michigan passed the ball more effectively than they ran the ball.
Is there anybody that excites you now? Like, I guess, looking at some of the guys coming in that, portal or current players, or, just following spring ball a little bit, what guys do you think are going to, fit that mold right now on Nebraska's defense?
It's interesting because they brought in a lot of young guys, a lot of guys who kind of, I don't want to say they're under the radar, but they don't have gigantic names. So I could say their names here, but I don't know that it's going to pop off the screen. I think there's a lot of guys with a lot of tackles, a lot of mobility, a lot of physicality, athletes. Okay. And then you try to fit them in or plug them in where you think they're going to work best athletically, and then you just see how they react physically. And so I think that's going to be the biggest question mark, is how these guys react physically, because they brought in some pretty athletic guys, especially linebacker, kind of that safety mold, so to speak.
Yeah, I know that kid they brought in from Harrisburg, PA. I'm blanking on his name right now, but I know that it's the only year he's played any sport, his senior year of football. So yeah, they have brought in those kind of athletes. Frost kind of left the program, he inherited some talented defensive linemen under Riley with, the Daniels brothers. But there haven't been that many guys to come in. You didn't really fill the cupboard with new talent. How important is the portal? And, who among the guys we have left, how important is a guy like Ty Robinson going into next year with that kind of a defense?
Well, I think Ty Robinson's big because he's one of the few guys with starting experience with much playing experience at all. About the only guy I can really think of. I know Hutmaker started some games and got some playing time and whatnot, but he's probably the guy that stands out the most. When you think about Frost and how he recruited, he averaged the 20th class in the country during his span at Nebraska. So he recruited some talent. And if you looked at our roster over the years, I could easily argue that we had the fourth most talented roster behind Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State. Obviously, it didn't come to fruition on the field. So what I'm curious to see is development. How do they we had a lot of guys, everybody transfer. I don't want to say everybody transfers, but everybody has a lot of people who transfer now, but we seem to have even more so than most people. And I think that was one of the biggest issues is you'd look at, Frost year 2. Oh, we got a lot of young guys. Just wait till 2 years from now. A lot of those guys wouldn't be there 2 years from now. Right. So can we have more guys stay around, more buy into the program, which is going to allow for better development? Because we had talent, but we were always young because there seemed to be a lot of guys transferring out.
Well, right. I agree with you on they have talent, but when you have so much talent and we have guys who are wondering who's going to play first team, who's going to play second team, do we have dissension because we have a discrepancy about who has the most talent? How do you use that much talent? Especially when you don't know each other, everybody's new.
I think that's kind of what Matt Rhule's figuring out right now. I think it's a get to know you process. And for me, I'm always excited to see talent, but I think I mentioned this. I'm always excited to see once you get them on the field, who's physical, how do they react mentally?
Right.
What's their approach as far as, hey, football is a great, fun game and you need athleticism, but at the end of the day, it's not a contact sport. It's a collision sport. Who's going to go out and hit and who's going to knock somebody backwards? And if you get knocked on your keister, are you willing to get back up and go just as hard the next time, not knowing what's going to happen? And are you willing to do it play after play after play after play? And then who's willing not to do it anymore in the fourth quarter and who is? So to me, I think it's a get to know you process. And I think that's what Matt Rhule's doing right now.
What do you think the staff and Coach Rhule, what's their number one thing to success in their first year?
People are going to hate this answer because we've heard this C word, for umpteen years, but he's got to develop an actual culture. Like I talked about people buying in. Part of a culture is leaders emerging and people buying in. And I know that's going to drive people nuts, but you got to actually develop it. And you've got to develop, it's a culture of the weight room. It's a culture of how you practice. It's a culture of physicality and how you respond. It's a lot of the things that we've chatted about already, but that's the biggest thing he's got to do. And if someone doesn't buy in, I don't want to say a mass exodus is what you're looking for, but you want the people who are bought in to stay, and everyone else, you wish them the best wherever they'd like to go, because that's ultimately what you need, because that's going to reverberate, in my opinion, throughout the locker room. And a lot of these fourth quarter losses that we've had, instead of guys who are maybe wavering, now you've got guys who are in. And that could be the difference in some of these close games that we've had over the years.
Speaking of buy-in, I've got a question mark right here on my notes. NIL, Nebraska. Talk about NIL a little bit and how you think, I always hear, hey, Nebraska's ahead of the game when it comes to NIL, and they've got these groups and they, this new locker room and recruits and everything. Talk a little bit about how this works specifically for Nebraska and how you see this actually really creating a successful culture.
I think it definitely helps Nebraska. I think it helps Nebraska in the aspect of there are big Nebraska fans who want to see Nebraska win, who have a little bit of moolah. And you need some moolah if you're going to have it.
They got a lot of moolah.
Oh,
well, yeah. Okay.
Quite a bit.
Now, I'm not all about buying players because that's not going to go well. Okay. You can have you know who I'm going to allude to here, but you can have the greatest recruiting class in the history of college football. and then a really bad season and a mass exodus like a school in the state of Texas just had. So you want players who want to buy in, but when you've got people who are bought into the program from a booster standpoint with a lot of moolah, that's going to help you. And Nebraska, it's a phenomenal state. There are certain things we have that are just awesome. There are certain things that maybe other states have that people have argued over the years to give them the edge in recruiting. And so I think Nebraska, the program and the folks involved are well aware we got to find our edge. And so for a long time, it was strength and conditioning. Okay. And now it's like, well, what's our edge going to be? Well, it could very well be our facilities. It could very well be NIL, not buying players, but providing opportunities that maybe other schools aren't going to.
Yeah, it's funny you talk about that edge, because that was kind of my next question. Is we talked about the NIL, we talked about culture, we've talked about scheme, we've talked about a bunch of different things, but like, you throw the bones at the end of your show. How do the Blackshirts get back to that kind of swagger and having that kind of edge next season? Because I think what would you say the single greatest thing? Obviously, it's a combination of all of them, but what is the single most important thing the Blackshirts need to do this year to get that back?
Oh man, anytime somebody makes me pick one thing, that's always challenging to do, no matter what it is. If I had to pick one thing, honestly, it would be the mentality, especially if you're going to run a 3-3-5, because you've got to go fast, you've got to stun hard, you've got to blitz, and you've got to be able to disguise. And all of a sudden you disguise, now you're coming. You've got to be willing, if you're a 225-pound safety, to knock that 330-pound pulling offensive guard in the mouth on a power play. Like, you've got to be willing to do these things, because you're trying to confuse and distract the offense so they miss guys, and you've got guys coming free into the backfield, but they're coached too. It's not going to happen every play. So the plays that doesn't happen, you're going to have to find ways to make plays. And, I think of a guy like Brandon Rigoni. If you guys remember him, I played with him. Yeah. We came in together, a walk-on, a lifter of the year, and a captain. He was arguably the smallest collegiate player I'd ever seen at a major Division I college. Nobody wanted to hit him. Nobody wanted none. He was the wedge buster back when you could do wedges on a kickoff return, and nobody in practice wanted to be on the wedge because you knew that heat-seeking missile was coming. And nobody, you could see the other teams. They'd watch film. The wedge guys, you could see they knew what was coming, and we'd all sit and watch. Like, this is great, but especially as defensive guys before we took the field. You ain't got to be big or gigantic or anything like that. His mentality was on not another level, like 5 other levels. And so
talk about what that mentality did for what that mentality do for guys that got to watch that at practice.
Well, it reverberates through the locker room. I talk about culture. When you have guys that are doing, I've done conditioning sessions where some of the leaders on the team are begging, take one off, slow down, give us another 5 seconds on the gasser. And I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what is this? What is this? When you've got guys that are finishing across the line and they're barely making it, maybe they puke and they go again, or you've got, maybe the smallest guy on the team size-wise, but he's got the biggest heart and nobody wants to hit him. Those are things that reverberate throughout the locker room. Yeah. And that's what culture really is. And so to me, that's what I'd like to see, is a mentality like that. And then hopefully eventually over time, they get better and better and better. And the scoreboard is more the way we like it. But I think that's where I'd like to start.
I really like Coach Rhule a lot, Adam, but what type of team does he have?
Oh, good Lord, nobody knows.
I
don't have any idea.
I mean, the coaches that he's bringing in, because that makes really a difference in the attitude of the players, the position coaches, and calling the right plays at the right time that the players trust what you're calling.
No, I'm with you, man. But I've seen it so many years. I talk about the potential of the offensive line ad nauseum year after year, because we have talented guys, we have highly recruited guys, we have big guys. And then we look like a holy cup where the water is just leaking through all the holes, unfortunately. And it's just like, what type of team does he said it at the end of the first spring practice. He goes, I don't know if we're any good. I mean, he had several positive things to say. He pointed out several positive things, but then he was honest. He's like, I don't know how good we are. What he has is talent, ability. I don't know how to be anything but honest. I'm not trying to take shots. He doesn't have a team that's been well coached for years, in my opinion. So he's going to have to kind of start from ground one with some of the basics and fundamentals and teaching them the right mental approach. So what they're actually going to look like on game day, I don't know. I hope they look a lot different a month into the season than 2 months and 3 months than they did on day one, because that means they're getting better. And we just haven't seen that at Nebraska in a long time, in my opinion.
Well, what about the coaches as a team?
Man, you know,
that's the team I'm actually referring to, his coaching squad.
So it's interesting because as we know, he's got a lot of young coaches. He's got,
he does.
So when I interviewed him, dude, I did not pull a single question. I asked him every question I wanted to. And I said it in a nice way. It's not what you say, it's how you say it. So I would ask him nicely. I was like, hey man, so you got a lot of young coaches, a lot of interest in this. Talk to me about these young coaches. And it was interesting because you could tell he was getting tired of hearing that question. You know, in his defense, he probably, you know, Nebraska is a great place, a lot of passion, invokes a lot of questions, you know. His response was great. And he pointed out something that had not occurred to me. Yes, there's a lot of young assistant coaches, but he wanted to make sure that anybody who was a play caller, in other words, a coordinator, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator, was experienced. And I was like, well, dang, every single one of them are experienced. They've all done this before, multiple times at high levels at great success. You know, Satterfield's probably the biggest question mark. They had a lot of success at the end of the South Carolina season, but there was ups and downs. But every single coordinator he brought in was someone who's done this before and is experienced. And then I think he likes grooming young assistant coaches. It's kind of like the draft. If you try to build through the NFL draft, you can teach those players the way you want them to approach things, where if you build just through free agency, those players have already learned a way and they may or may not listen. So I think that was his approach with his assistant coaches. And when he pointed that out to me, I was like, that makes a lot of freaking sense.
Scott, I haven't heard that perspective, but to me, I guess I've needed something too. So thanks for that. Because I've been trying to figure out, like, what is it, you know, like how does he feeling comfortable with all the coaches? They're like you said, they're young and but they've all had success. They've been places. And I think from what I've heard and what I've seen, you know, we went to practice there. Johnny, you saw it. Is Coach Rhule, he's demanding of his coaches. And I think that's great. I think you have to be that way, and you got to be hard on them. And I just I appreciated that because they're so young. They probably need that too. You know, they need some guidance as well.
Yeah, I think like I said, he wanted to make sure the coordinators, the play callers were experienced. But I've heard this. You guys have probably heard this as well. I've heard it several times. The head coach coaches the coaches, and then the coaches coach the players.
Right.
I get the feeling that that's Coach Rhule's approach.
Yeah, no doubt.
Right. I've noticed him coaching the players as he coached the coaches during the practice, because he was coaching players that the coaches should have been coaching, but that way he was able to coach them both at the same time.
Yeah, I think he's kind of teaching everybody what he wants, from the coaches to probably the nutrition staff, the weight staff. He's worked with a lot of these guys before, to the players as well. So it's a get to know you honeymoon process, shall we say, until that kickoff of game one, and then the honeymoon process. You know,
so you get hit in the mouth. Huh?
Yeah, you got to get sped up. So
have you had a chance? Yeah, I got a question for you here, Adam. If you looked at the schedule, like a lot of, like, I don't know, I try not to do this, and this is probably an awful question, but you start looking at the schedule and you go, you know, new coach, schedule looks, you know, maybe okay. I mean, do you see a bowl game? What do you see in the future of this team? You know, when you start looking at the schedule and how many wins you want them to have, and how many, you know, what would you consider, I guess, a successful season when you talk about wins and losses for this program?
So this is not, I mean, obviously it's before the season. You know, you look back at the end of the year, hindsight's 2020, but you look at the schedule right now, it does not look like murderer's row exactly.
Yeah.
Right. I think our toughest non-conference game is the most hyped up one anyway, is going to be Colorado, who had one win a year ago. And, you know, we could easily come out of the non-conference. We should with 3 wins at least, if not potentially 4. So, and even the conference schedule, Like how many years in a row did we play Ohio State? 50,000? It felt like it anyway. So I believe we're playing Michigan. I know we go to Iowa, to Wisconsin. Yeah. Wisconsin's got a new coach trying to put in a new type offense, which is going to be interesting. They're going to run spread, throw the ball. I didn't know they knew how to do that. They haven't needed to for a long time, honestly.
Ever.
Iowa's just trying to get to 25 points a game so they don't have to fire their offensive coordinator. So for me, I mean, like I said, who knows what this team's going to look like? I hope they look a lot different a month and 2 and 3 into the season than they do game 1. I do think 6 wins is very doable. I really do, because they do have talent. They do have ability. They got to start from ground 1 in some areas, but it's not murderer's row schedule. And I'm pretty sure if Rhule got to 6-6 and got to a bowl game this year, I think most Husker fans would probably be pretty happy with that.
Oh, I agree.
Oh,
What's your thoughts on, let's just say 2 years from now, where you've got UCLA and USC in this conference? How does Nebraska fit into that?
Well, there's not going to be divisions anymore. So I don't want to say we blew our chance in the weakest division of all the Power 5 conferences, but the Big Ten West is not a powerhouse, and we should have won it more often. Maybe we can shock the world and do it this year. Who knows?
Yeah.
But when USC and UCLA come over, I don't know if we're going to go to a pod type schedule like the SEC, where you play the same 3 teams every year and then you rotate 6 for a year and then the other 6 for a year. I don't know how we're going to do it, but I'm excited because, first of all, the Big Ten Conference is now a national coast-to-coast conference, east to west coast.
Yeah.
The exposure that the Big Ten is going to get is crazy, which has got to help with recruiting. And we've never had as a conference, we've never had an end to one of the 3 major recruiting states. The Pac-12 has obviously got California. The Big 12's obviously got Texas. The ACC has Florida. The SEC has Florida and Texas and Georgia, who's probably number 4 if you were to rank the top 4 states in the country as far as high school talent. We don't have anything to any of those, but now we do. And I'm telling you, I wouldn't hate it if we played USC and UCLA on a frequent basis. I know they're very, very good. But now Rhule's going to build a little bit of a pipeline into Texas because he's got those relationships. But now all of a sudden we're getting exposure into California. And I'm still a believer you start with the in-state kids first, but then you have to go outwards. And so for me, I like the idea of playing those teams, and it makes us a better conference. And it is a tougher schedule. But to me, I think it helps us as far as exposure as a conference, as a team, and in recruiting, because now we're into one of those major high school talent recruiting states.
Absolutely, man. Well, it's been so good talking to you. I know that you're a little limited on time here. Do you guys have anything else for Adam before we part ways?
I just can't wait for him to throw those bones on our show.
I can't. I'm glad you're keeping hope alive, Adam. Keep hope alive.
So my wife did a phenomenal job setting this up. Okay. But the one thing that disappointed me was I couldn't show the shirt. So now I can show the shirt.
Oh, yeah.
I love it, man.
There you go.
Adam, we thank you so much, man. Thanks for your time as always. Hopefully you'll be at that Colorado game. I'm trying to get out there myself, and we can reconnect.
Thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome anytime, Adam.
Good luck with those kiddos.
I appreciate it. Pray for me.
Well, he definitely knows the game. I can tell he's dug deep down in and understands what's really going on, physically and psychologically, because I'm getting to think more and more that football is more of a psychological game than the physical part of it.
Oh, there's no doubt about that.
Psychologically is what I'm really concerned about. It physically, everybody's got it, but mentally, that's where you set people apart. What do you think you got?
Yeah,
You look good, but that doesn't mean you're thinking good.
Well, he used the word mentality is kind of a focus for him, and seeing how this coaching staff is able to influence the players. And I agree with him. You got to be willing to run through that wall, and you got to be willing to get knocked down and do it over and over and over again. So you got to be extremely tough, and you got to be determined. I mean, the programs and how successful we were, Johnny.
Yeah. Well, it's mental toughness.
You have to have it. If you don't have it, you have nothing.
Yeah. I had I can't remember the guy's name, but he was one of the littlest guys on the team. And I said, well, golly, you sure are a little guy. And he said, I'm the biggest guy out here.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you,
He
man,
probably
he's a
was.
legendary black shirt. And if anybody knows the mentality, it's a guy like Adam Carriker, and he's done a great job in broadcast in the last 4 or 5 years. So I'm excited to see where he goes with that. But, I'm curious what you guys think too. Like, what do you guys think about this 3-3-5 scheme? I mean, it's clear, on one hand, to me, I kind of agreed with Adam in the sense that, this is a defense that was kind of built to defend the spread. You got 5 defensive backs. You blitz and you confuse. It's really meant to disrupt the pass game. And we play in a run heavy conference. That being said, there's one hand. I thought he brought up a great point talking about TCU against Michigan, because I thought Michigan was going to run all over TCU. It didn't really happen. And then on top of that, there's Tony White's, the evidence he has on the field. That defense was pretty good. In the ACC last year. So I can look at a scheme as much as I want and think what I think about it, but the proof's kind of in the pudding. And I'm wondering what you guys are thinking, because we weren't that great at stopping the run and whatever defense we were in last year. So,
well, I mean, any change is going to be a good change, I think. And, it just makes me think of discipline and toughness. Those 2 words come to my mind. I mean, you got to be extremely disciplined. You got to be in the right places, but you also have to be tough. And, you got to be able to, take the guys on that are bigger than you. And that's going to be a lot of the time the case in the Big Ten, when you're going up against those bigger opponents, linemen, linebackers, there's other teams with fullbacks and big tight ends and receivers. So discipline and toughness. And we'll see if Coach White's defense can handle it.
Well, I'm down for the mental toughness. See where we go mentally. It's all of what you believe. It doesn't make a difference if you're big or small, if we're willing to do whatever's necessary to get the job done. And you get it done because of the guys next to you. You don't want to disappoint your teammates. Do they know each other that well? Do they know the coaches that well? Can they make that big of an impact on them that quick and to get them to the point where they rather slide bears on their razor blade than to disappoint those coaches? I mean, that's what it's really going to take.
Yeah.
It doesn't make a difference about the defense, what they decide to play. You got to be willing to make the changes.
Yeah.
You want to bring something new into the game. You want to be the one, the man. So they're bringing on opportunities. They're giving a lot of these guys opportunities, not just to win football games, but to go into the pros and make a name for themselves.
Let me ask you guys this. You guys were at practice. I know Adam's in Colorado, so he didn't get that same opportunity. What did you see from the defensive line and from the defense in general while you were there and the time that you got to see it?
Well, it's like doctors. That's why they call them practitioners, because they just practicing. They're players, but they're just practicing. So, in the first practice, you don't really get a good look at really what it is from the first practice. Because like I said, it's not even physical, it's mental. The mental attitude that you got to get to what the guys are thinking. And when the chips are down, how they're pulling together. And we'll probably see more of that as we go along. But I was impressed with the look. I was impressed with the speed of not just the linemen, but actually of the backs and the line. So I think they're in the right place at the right time. It's just a matter of if they're mentally ready, if we can pull them together as a team, because we can have great players, but if they don't play together, we're not going to make make that turn.
Yeah, I agree, Johnny. Look, was nice. The speed was good, I thought. And, we always want a little bit more, but I guess if I had to pick something that I might be concerned about with the defense at this point would just be, depth and experience. When you got a new coach and new team and you kind of rotated players on, it's like Coach Rhule said early on, man, I don't know what kind of team we're going to have. And, he's learning and the coaches are learning and everybody's learning about each other. And I guess that's the thing that, can scare me just a little bit, but, try to be positive with this. And, they've got the players that want to be there. Let's go play ball, right? I mean, build some depth, let guys, run wild a little bit and make some plays. And, they got to be smart though. I mean, like you said, but when it comes down to the experience thing, how smart can you be? Because, there's not a ton of experience out there right now. And, And I know the guys are moving and shaking and things like that, and they're trying to find out who's going to be, you know, taking the lead role. But they need to build some depth. You know, it's a long season, and to play in the Big Ten. And, you know, when you talk about, you know, being smaller and having to have more speed, and you can run into some injuries and things of that nature. So some depth would be nice.
Well, I'm just hoping that the coaches are smart enough to make it easy on the players, that they could call a good game, and at the right place at the right time, so the guys feel that they have an advantage that the coaches are giving them, because the coaches are stepping up, and we don't have to worry about them being that physical all the time because they're smart. And we're playing smart. We're running, you know, the blitzes when we're supposed to. We're hiding things, and you know, and we're just giving us some type of a way that we're going to have some type of an advantage because of how creative we could be in using our speed and our players well. And the coaches the players really believe in their coaches, because they have to believe in the coaching staff, and the coaching staff has to believe in the players. But more so than that, the players have to believe in the coaches, because that's what made my difference, is because Coach Osborne was such a smart coach. I was very confident when he called something that it really wasn't going to be for nothing, that we could actually get it done. And everybody else believed it too, and we did get it done, you know. So, but sometimes I've seen coaches call plays that, why are they keep calling this thing god dang play and it ain't working?
Right.
Are you
you
crazy?
gotta execute them. Gotta execute them. Well,
Yeah,
I think you're right too, Eric. Like the level of experience, when you look at the guys that are coming back, it's not a lot. You know, Ty Robinson, Stephon Wynn, you know, Nash, Nash doesn't have that much experience. Like, you know, it's not a deep group for us. And it wasn't something we were particularly good at. Gone to the portal to get Elijah Judy out of A&M. It's a 4-star player. MJ Sherman out of Georgia. We've added some talent, and we added some talent in the class. But that's a lot of young guys trying to learn a new system. And that's always going to be difficult too. You know, I know we've all talked about drinking the Rhule, but from the reports, and this is from, you know, the horse's mouth, it's from Rhule. He said that they played a live scrimmage against the quarterbacks, where the quarterbacks get hit live, and the quarterbacks had their way with them. They were taking off on huge runs, and that the offense looked clearly ahead of the defense at this point in the game. So, you know, I think everybody's learning new stuff, but obviously the 3-3-5 scheme is going to be real different for them. There's not that much experience, but they got a long way to go. You know, you can't it's not all roses. It's easy to be hyped up, but we have to, you know, there's a level of concern. How concerned are you guys at this point in camp that the offense would have their way? Would that happen to you guys? Because actually, I think a lot of the time it's kind of the other way around, that like the defense can kind of just play, and, you know, the offense has to, you know, execute whatever plays they're trying to run, and you have new guys in spring ball. So like, you know, it's the defense has an advantage early on, but in this case, that's not.
Well, I like the fact that it puts a little fire, I think, underneath, you know, the staff and the players on defense, where usually, like what you just said, Sam, that's not the case. You know, usually they're just kind of playing and the offense is the one struggling. If the defense is struggling, that puts the fire under them. And so you got to be able to, you know, the defense for Nebraska just hasn't been the same in recent years. So to be able to put a little bit of, oomph in them early and test them and see who's going to come back with some resolve and play harder and become a leader, and how's the staff going to, you know, take to that as a little bit of a challenge early on in the spring. It'd be interesting to see. And I think it's going to be a good thing for this team and for Coach Rhule to see how they handle that.
Well, I'm just hoping that the Blackshirts have been listening to the people in the public, because I was really discouraged when I hear so many people calling the Blackshirts the black skirts.
Yeah, that should be a definite slap in the mouth right there.
That's exactly right.
If that isn't going to get you going, I don't know what will.
Yes, right. Don't be pulling your
That should
dress
get you
up,
going.
baby.
That should get you
Yeah.
going. It gets me going. We want to all see him get back, right? Like we want to see him.
Oh yeah,
We want to see him
be
do
mean.
it, but they got to do it. And I think that they've got an uphill battle. The talent isn't, you know, I think that Frost, you know, it seemed like Frost is kind of, particularly with defensive linemen, we don't want to just, you know, talk about Frost doing everything bad. There were a lot of good things. The linebacker room improved under Frost, you know, Luke Reimer, and those guys, but the defensive line is kind of just progressively we've lost, the Davis brothers, Ben Stilley, these guys just kind of left and we didn't really fill it back in. So going to the portal, I think, is really important going forward. And I think, developing, as you guys, everybody has said, that's what Rhule really has to cash in on, is what he's, been touted as a development coach. And that's what has to happen here.
And with that development, Sam,
around.
I don't even think you can hand out black shirts this year. I think they need to play defense and learn about what that means. And once they start playing that type of football, maybe you start handing it out to that player who exemplifies that
one
type
at
of
a time
ability. Yeah,
one at a time.
One at a time. And then the guy gets one and like, why did he get that? Well, look what he's doing at practice in the game. Okay,
How
I
did he
want
get
that.
it? Yeah,
And then
right.
and then the other guy goes, well, I want one of those. Like he's going to start. It might just start a whole thing to build it that way. So anyway, that's how I feel it should take place.
Absolutely. And I like the single digit jersey. I don't know if you guys read about that that he's also not letting, he's handing out single digit jerseys, like based on your mentality, as we talked about all day, of the mentality in practice, and guys who want to play hard and get back up and hit hard and are physical and do their job right and are accountable, do all the things that they want out of the players. So I think they did that to Blackshirts too. I think that's the way to go.